Hi, welcome back to the Growing Gains podcast. I'm Grace, your host, and today we have Helen. Helen, can you give us an introduction of yourself?
Hi, so I'm Helen, and I used to go to Dawson Girls' School in Hong Kong, and then I switched to German Swiss for GCSEs, and then for sixth form I went to Westminster School in the UK.
Okay, great. And Westminster is a private school, was it?
So it's one of the more prestigious private boarding schools in the UK. It's located in central London, so it has a really, really convenient location, and it also has quite good A-level results every year.
Okay, great. And so jumping right in, what were some expectations you had for studying in the UK, and how did it turn out? Were these expectations true or false?
So I think one of the biggest expectations for Westminster was that it would be very academically rigorous because of its reputation in the UK, etc. But I think it was quite surprising because when I went there, people generally have a less intense work ethic. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, okay, yeah. It's more laid back, right?
Yeah, So I think people in the UK are more laid back with their academics compared to Hong Kong, where we're like drilling past papers every single day before our GCSEs or before our like placement tests when I was in DGS. So I think it was quite different to what I expected it to be. And I also think aside from academics, I think the cultural shock was pretty bad for me because I think in Hong Kong, obviously, I lived in a bubble where I went to like DGS and I went to German Swiss, and I was surrounded by people with very, very similar background with me. So I didn't really have an opportunity to interact with people like that are foreign students, etc. So when I went to Westminster, it was really different because people are way more extroverted there. They were way more open about their opinions. They're not scared to disagree with each other. And I think that's something that's really valuable, and I came to learn when I was in Westminster. But at the very start, I was really not used to this culture, so it was quite hard for me to integrate. And I sort of had to like almost force myself to be really extroverted and talk to a lot of people.
Okay, so apart from like encouraging debate, were they also welcoming of others' opinions? So like, yeah, did you feel welcomed and stuff like that?
I think generally the community is quite nice, but I think there's a lot of implicit racism and xenophobia that goes around the school. So, for example, when I went there, people labeled all the Chinese as like, oh, the Asians, and they sort of stereotyped Asians by saying, they're all very quiet, they don't really go to parties, they don't really have fun, and so they sort of excluded Asian-looking people from their friend groups at the very start. And I found that a bit shocking, to be fair, because as a really good school in the UK, I would expect them to be way more liberal and sort of accepting of people of different races. But obviously that was not the case for me. And so I had a really hard time trying to integrate in. And although at the end of these by the end of these 2 years, it became way better. I had a lot of friends that I like and that I talk to. But at the very start, I think xenophobia was pretty bad.
Okay, and have you talked to other people who have gone to the UK but are studying in different schools than you? Do you think they have this similar? Do you think they have similar experiences with like xenophobia and what you talked about just now?
Yeah, I think aside from like xenophobia, obviously there are a lot of different types of discrimination. So, for example, in the UK there was a very big sexual assault scandal, and it was where a lot of schools started revealing the sexual assault scandals that happened in their own schools and about how their institutions refused to do anything about it. And I think a lot of these problems sort of run through the UK education system, and there's not a lot of things being done with it. So yeah, I think it's shared with a lot of other UK schools as well.
Okay, then talking about something that is more positive then, what are some positive experiences that you didn't think you would have, apart from like the academic situation being more relaxing for you?
I think one of the more positive things are in the UK, I kind of, I'm way more willing to share my opinions with other people compared to Hong Kong, because I think in Hong Kong, the culture kind of teaches me to sit at my seat and not disagree with other people. I have to be respectful to like my teachers, my parents, to my older siblings, and I can't really talk about what I think. And I'm encouraged to stay quiet when I was in Hong Kong. But in the UK, I was encouraged to sort of just say what I think. And I think this was really, really helpful because obviously, obviously by speaking what you think, I think this is the only way to create like good discussions, and you sort of learn more from other people as well when you don't only agree with them. I think that's one of the really, really positive things. But I think secondly is the opportunity I get in Westminster was also something that I would never have had if I stayed in Hong Kong. Like, for example, in Westminster, I was able to create my own club. I created an entrepreneurship club. I was able to hold events. And I cannot imagine myself doing that in Hong Kong, where a lot of people would tell me to like just be good at academics, and that's literally it. And yeah, so like in Westminster, I had a lot of opportunities to explore my other interests other than academics, which we're very grateful for.
Okay, great. And then more personally, I think just now you mentioned some like general phenomena. More personally, what do you think was the most challenging thing to you that maybe other like Hong Kong people who went there didn't experience? Do you think there were any?
I think, to be fair, personally, I don't get homesick very often, but I think a lot of people who were international boarders did experience that problem, which is obviously you're leaving home, and last 2 years there was COVID, and obviously flights were really hard to book, and you never know when you're going to see your parents or your family again. And that was really challenging for a lot of people because your family is almost your major support structure when you're in Hong Kong. And when you leave, you're in a very new environment. You don't have very, very close friends yet. So your support structure is not very, very strong. And so at that time, you need your family the most. But you can't always contact them because of time zones, because of COVID, and a lot of other like reasons. And so I think that would be one of the biggest challenges for people who are studying abroad.
Okay, and back to your academic situation. So you just mentioned that it was definitely less rigorous in the UK. So did you see a change in your academic ranking where you ranked higher? Is there such a thing?
I'd say my academic ranking myself is quite similar to what I was ranked in Hong Kong. And I think one of the major reasons is even though in the UK it's less academically rigorous, people put a lot of stress on learning things that are not only in the textbooks, which obviously at the end became really, really useful. So for example, a lot of my UK friends actually loves reading books, and they love discussing about what they've read in books. We have like this book club where everyone goes to like almost every day after school, and I think it's generally this they're all very interested in engaging in academic topics in discussions instead of concentrating on textbooks and drilling for tests. And I think this becomes more and more important as you move up the curriculum, because obviously for GCSEs, you're drilling for 12 different subjects. There's no capacity for you to sort of learn outside the box, have like really engaging academic discussions. But in A-levels, because we're only studying 4 subjects, there's a lot of time for you to sort of... For example, when I studied history, I read a lot of books that were from my time period, but they were not required in my academic syllabus. But they actually helped me a lot in my A-levels because when I was writing essays, I was able to bring those knowledge in. I was able to bring my peers' opinions in when like the ones that I heard when we discussed about it after school. So because of this, like the nature of A-levels, I think I was way more able to sort of explore the different academic areas that I was interested in.
Okay, and you said you were studying with your classmates, so did you all share notes? Did you actually study together and like, just produce notes?
To be fair, in Westminster it's super competitive, so a lot of my classmates were actually not very willing to share notes, and it was quite funny. And I don't really appreciate this culture because like other people's success shouldn't like threaten you in any way, and you guys should become better together. So, but because of the competitive nature in my school, we didn't really have things like sharing notes, but we definitely do study together when we're sitting together. And when we're sitting together after school, we would like ask each other questions and we don't understand certain topics, and the discussions are generally really, really good.
Okay, and again, the same question. Do you think this phenomenon was, again, like, appearing in other schools where they also, like, super competitive, where you heard from your friends?
I really think it depends on what type of school you go to and what people you're surrounded by. Like, when I go to Westminster, obviously Westminster is, like, quite prestigious, and people who go are generally, like, more sort of privileged in general and more fortunate, obviously. So I think this phenomenon would happen more seriously in Westminster. But then I think generally in other schools, I think it would be a bit better.
Okay, great. Not great, but yeah. Okay, so you've talked about kind of like a culture shock there. So do you notice yourself being influenced by the local culture, whatever it may be?
I think definitely, yeah. So when I was in Hong Kong, because I live in, like, obviously I have a Chinese family and all my views are quite conservative. I didn't really understand things like, for example, feminism, things like racism, things like social justice. I don't really have a sense of what's happening, and I didn't really have an opportunity to be in contact with them. But then when I went to the UK, I had a lot more opportunity to explore these topics that I'm interested in. And I think this culture of just like, obviously in the UK, people are way more liberal and like accepting towards things like, for example, same-sex marriage, for example, to things like abortion and to like euthanasia and all of these, because of like choice, because of bodily autonomy, etc. And I think because the idea of freedom is very respected in the UK, and respected actually way more compared to Hong Kong, I think this was something that sort of made me learn, and it made me, like, it gave me more knowledge in order to like make a stance of my own. So for example, now I'm like a huge feminist because like I understood a lot more problems that came with women in the UK, and that extends to Hong Kong as well. Like workplace rights, like things like how most women actually lose lawsuits to like sexual assaults, etc., etc. And I think these sort of cultural changes are really positive to myself. And I also think, aside from these more like academic discussions, I think the culture there is also obviously people are way more extroverted, etc. And I think that changed me a lot. Like, I used to be way less talkative.
No.
Like, I guess talkative in the sense that I don't say like random useless, like I used to say like random useless things, obviously, when I was smaller. But then I wasn't that talkative. I wasn't that eager to meet new friends when I switched to German Swiss, because I was very scared of like stepping outside of my comfort zone and interacting with people that were different to me. And I think that was the scenario for me when I switched to German Swiss in year 9. But when I came to Westminster, I sort of like, my personality sort of changed along with the culture that I'm influenced by over there. And now like I'm like almost like a people person. I gain my energy from meeting like new friends, and I can't wait to share my experiences and listen to other people's experiences. And I think this is a really, really positive change that I see in myself.
Okay, great to hear that. And then, so I think now it's more of like a summary of you studying abroad. So did you think that going abroad was worth it? Why did you go in the first place? And yeah, did you think you reached your goal there?
Yeah, so I think it was definitely worth it. I enjoyed every moment I had in Westminster, like all the ups and downs, because even though I talked about a lot of negative things like xenophobia, like, for example, less being less academically rigorous, etc., but I do think that I learned from these experiences. For example, if people exclude you, how do I deal with it? Like, I think these new experiences make who I am, so I definitely do not regret going to boarding school. And So yeah, I think it was really, really good, and I would definitely recommend anyone that is trying to go abroad. But obviously there are also drawbacks, like if you're someone that is very, very dependent on your parents, it would be quite difficult. Or if you're quite scared of meeting new people and you're scared of sort of being uncomfortable and thrown into environments where you don't know anyone, then obviously this is not a very good place to be in, since you're going to a completely new school and in an unfamiliar country.
Okay, and do you think everyone will find their own group or community there?
Yeah, I do think so. Like, I think no matter what personality or what interests you have, the good thing about studying abroad is you will definitely find someone that has the same interests as you, no matter what, because of how diverse the people are in most of these UK schools. Like, I think they're starting to accept more and more international students now. And so when I went there, I also have a group of friends who had the same interests as me, who experienced the same like xenophobia from people, and we were really able to like bond over that. And I think that was really valuable as well.
Okay, I have like a question. So you moved to GSIS, which is which is an international school essentially. So why don't you think like GSIS students were less why do you think GSIS students were less diverse than those in Westminster? Because that's what I'm hearing from your sharing.
To be fair, I think I think it's not that the people are less diverse, but I just think the opinions are way more diverse in Westminster compared to German Swiss. And I think part of the reason is obviously because I was only in German Swiss when I was year 9, 10, 11, and we were like younger and we had less opinions. We sort of went with the flow with everything, and we have way less of these very like deep discussions about topics we're interested in. But I also think in Westminster, people are way more politically engaged. And me as I'm very interested in politics, and obviously in a school that is way more politically engaged, I was able to learn a lot more from other people and sort of have a way more diverse range of opinions to listen to compared to German Swiss.
Okay, and then the last question would be, what advice would you give to current students who are studying in the UK, or to students who are looking to study in the UK? You can provide separate advice for them.
I think for students who want to go to the UK, I think the first thing to think is whether it's suitable for you, because even though it seems very idealistic, like going to a foreign country, everything's going to be perfect, you're going to do A-levels there, you're going to meet new friends, but I think the experience is quite challenging and you have to be quite independent, because in a boarding school, obviously your parents aren't there all the time. And I'd say, like, personally, I wouldn't recommend students going very, very early on, and I think going in for sixth form was a really good choice personally, because I think at that point I was independent enough academically and pastorally to take care of myself, and I think that is a very important thing. But also I think doing research about most schools and what subjects you are interested in, and seeing which schools are has a very good department for the subjects that you're interested in is really important. So I was very interested in history, and Westminster has one of the best history departments in the UK and has one of the best A-level results for history as well, which is why I really, really wanted to go to Westminster.
Okay, and then for students who are currently in the UK, do you have any advice for those who are struggling to fit in, or those who are dealing with those like xenophobia and different social issues that you just mentioned?
Like, obviously, it shouldn't be an us problem. Like, it should be people fixing their attitudes towards Asians or towards people that just looks different to them. But I think personally, we should also try to step out of our comfort zones and try to actively approach people if they decide not to approach us. And I think taking the active step too, and showing that you're not and show that this stereotype, like, obviously fitting into this stereotype is not a problem. Like, you can be quiet and you can not go to parties, etc. I think that's totally legitimate choice for you to make. But if you do not want to do that and you want to like join in and you want to feel like you fit in as well, obviously the first step to do is to step out of your comfort zone and greet people who are new and to talk to them and say, look, I'm not, as you said, I'm not someone who like doesn't like parties, I actually like going, and just expressing how you feel. And I think that is very important for them.
Okay, And then anything else to add? Right, so that's the end of our podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode, where we release episodes every Saturday. And see you guys. Have a great weekend or weekday.